Two murder investigations from the case files of Lieutenant Joe Kenda. First, a quiet evening is pierced by gunfire.
Please, Don.
He's been shot in the back and it exited his chest.
Lieutenant Kenda is on the hunt for a faceless gunman with a mysterious motive.
Our question is, why did this happen?
Did he make somebody mad? Was he at the wrong place at the wrong time?
That name hit me like a slap in the face.
Yo, come out, we're coming in.
Then, an attempt to settle a score turns fatal.
Do I know you? Whoa!
Jealousy and rage and possession. It's a pretty bad cocktail.
Murder's like the economy. It goes up and down. You have good years, bad years. Something I've always found interesting, when murder is down somewhere, it's down everywhere. It's almost as if there is a national biorhythm. But could I explain that? No.
Clyde Williams and Barry Loggins were driving home after a 4th of July get-together. It was a nice summer night. They had the windows down.
July 4th in Colorado Springs area, there's a lot of people out celebrating early, celebrating late, running fireworks all the time.
Bro, I'm so psyched about this weekend. You're going to Bobby's party, right? For sure. Nice. Man, them Roman candles he got, gonna be awesome. Dude, what the hell is this guy doing? God, help me. Please. Yo, what happened, man? Oh, my God. What are we gonna do?
They see that he's been shot. This guy is in bad shape. He's bleeding profusely, and he subsequently loses consciousness.
Oh, no, dude. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Somebody help. Call 911 now.
Is he okay?
Call 911.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
"30 minutes later, Kenda steps out onto East San Miguel.
Hey, Mike, so what do we got? The Vic is 27-year-old Donald Zampa, shot once in the back. He's currently at Memorial Hospital in critical condition.
Donald Zampa is 27 years old. He's only been in Colorado Springs for a few months, and he is a maintenance worker at a local motel.
Any witnesses? The two guys that found him didn't see anything. Now, we are currently canvassing the neighborhood as we speak. This that guy right here, huh? Yeah, right there.
The crime scene itself is bloodstained, of course, and there's some medical waste laying around, and also the shirt and sport coat worn by the victim. It is unusual to find someone wearing a sport coat and tie in this neighborhood at 2:30 in the morning. So where did he come from, and where was he going to, and what interrupted that?
Now, the slug is over here. CSI said it looks like a 38.
So it went right through him, huh?
Yeah.
He's been shot in the back, and it exited his chest.
Could have been a robbery. Did you find any money on him?
You know, I thought the same thing, except that his wallet's still in his pants right there, with 20 bucks still in it.
Huh.
Well, that's strange. If this is a robbery, why wouldn't they have taken his wallet?
It could be an intentional assault against Donald Zampa for some reason, some perceived wrong he's committed against someone, some enemy of his. At this point, we have many more questions than we have answers.
Hey, Sergeant. Got the kid called in the shooting if you want to speak to him.
Sure, where is he?
It's right down here.
Chris Powell is a white male, about 18 years old, kind of small in stature.
You tell us what you're doing out here tonight?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't out. I was at my buddy's place down the street.
What were you doing there?
I'm staying there. I came from Ohio, so I'm kind of figuring out the job situation. You know, it's really hard these days.
Yeah, I understand. But tonight, how'd you end up calling the police?
He tells us that he hears a gunshot. He looks out, he sees the victim down and sees two other people running up to him to help.
So I figured the best thing to do was to call you guys.
So you didn't see the shooter or anyone suspicious?
No, sir. No, sir.
You look extremely nervous, Mr. Powell. Is there more to this story that you're not telling us?
Is everything all right, Chris?
Yeah, I'm fine. It was just crazy to see, you know? That's all. Is that guy gonna be okay?
We don't know. Thank you.
He was awfully nervous.
Sure was.
Here's an 18-year-old, probably has never seen somebody shot. He may not be hiding anything, but we, being cops, are gonna question that.
Hey, Sergeant. We just got word from the hospital. The victim's conscious.
Okay, good. I'm gonna take a ride over to Memorial. I want you to go ahead and supervise the rest of the canvas. I'll be right back.
You got it.
This is good for us. There might be something he could tell us that'll help clear up this matter.
Excuse me, can I have a minute with him?
Sure. Need to make it quick. He's not out of the woods yet. We're prepping him for another surgery.
The victim in this case is shot in the back. It's a perforating gunshot wound and ends up going out the chest. So anytime you have somebody who's got a perforating gunshot wound in the chest or abdomen, there's a lot of very important organs that are between the entrance and the exit wound. Those cases are immediately life-threatening, and they have to be treated that way. You're gonna start bleeding, you're gonna have significant pain, you may not be able to breathe really well. All those things can contribute to loss of consciousness. When a bullet passes through a body, it's going to cause damage not only in the organs it pokes holes in, but it can also cause damage other places as this big pressure wave goes through the body. So number one, you're worried about bleeding. Two, significant injuries to vital organs like lungs and heart. Even if you survive the initial period, you're not out of the woods yet because there's a significant risk of infection that's going to be created by these injuries. There's a lot of things, obviously, that have to go right for you to be able to survive.
This may be the last opportunity for Donald Zampa to say anything, because if he doesn't survive the surgery, then the only statement we're going to get is what we're going to get right now.
Donald, I'm Sergeant Kenda. How you feeling?
I've been better.
Yeah, I'm sure. Listen, I need you to remember everything you possibly can about what happened tonight.
Okay. I went to Graham's for a drink and to watch the game.
Graham's was more of a neighborhood bar where people hung out. People knew each other, and Donald was a regular customer.
He tells us that he left the bar and he was walking home. As he's walking, he hears somebody yell at him.
Don't turn around.
Whoa, man.
And he feels what he believes to be a gun pushed into his back.
Keep your hands up and get on your knees.
Come on, man. Easy.
I had no idea what was happening, so I just did whatever the guy told me. But then as soon as I knelt down, I heard this loud crack and my chest got hot. Then everything went numb and I couldn't move.
So, of course, we asked Donald, do you have enemies? Is there somebody out to get you? He said, oh, no, I don't make enemies, I make friends. So that eliminates the possibility of most likely a known person to him. This is someone that doesn't know him at all.
Now, I know you said you had your back to the shooter, but did you see him at all or have any idea what he looks like?
No. Even if I did, I don't think it would have mattered much. Without my glasses, I'm legally blind.
Sergeant, it's time to head out.
All right, just one more question. Is there anything at all you can remember about this guy?
Yeah, actually. He had an accent, maybe like a Hispanic accent.
All right, well, thank you.
Sorry, Kenda.
I understand.
Kenda heads back to the crime scene with troubles on his mind.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, what do we know? Is he an Hispanic male? Probably. Does he know Donald Zampa? Probably not. We have very little to go on here. Very little indeed.
Mike?
Hey, Kenda. You get anything at the hospital?
No, I didn't get much. It says the shooter sounds Hispanic.
That's funny. We got a witness who says he saw the shooter, thinks he looks Hispanic.
Really?
Well, now, maybe that's our guy. That's the first interesting thing I've heard tonight. We're working on the shooting of 27-year-old Donald Zampa. All we know is his shooter sounded Hispanic. But now we have a witness who claims to have seen the shooter. Our witness is Edward Esterly. He's living immediately adjacent to the scene.
We were told you saw something tonight?
He reports that he has been up and down during the night because in the last several days, they've been having problems in this neighborhood with break-ins of cars.
When I looked out the window to check on my car, I saw this Hispanic guy looking into it. But when I got outside, the guy was gone. And then I heard the gunshot, and I got the hell out of there.
So could that mean that this Hispanic male was looking to steal something out of cars? And at that moment, he notices Mr. Zampa strolling down the street, and does he decide he needs to remove a potential witness?
Don't turn around. Keep your hands up and get on your knees.
What this guy look like?
He was definitely Hispanic, I guess 25 to 30 years old.
You remember what he was wearing?
Yeah, he had on this weird-looking Hawaiian shirt.
Hawaiian shirt.
Is this guy possibly the suspect? We don't know, but that's where we're headed at this point.
Hey, Sarge. Hey, we've still got a guy matching that description.
Where is he?
He's in the cruiser.
Thanks for your help.
Well, could this be our mysterious man?
Step out.
Tell us your name.
Miguel Diaz.
He does not have a Hispanic accent. He has no discernible accent whatsoever.
That really kind of blows our theory out of the water, but we still look into him.
So what were you doing out here tonight, Miguel?
I was on my way home, and I heard a couple guys shout that someone got shot. Saw the guy lying on the street, so I ran off, found a payphone, called 911.
You check on that for us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, we got some reports of a guy in a Hawaiian shirt peering into vehicles. What can you tell me about that?
I just really like cars. Checks out.
We were able to confirm that he had called 911 to report this crime. So his story is holding true. Maybe he's a BMV suspect and not a murder suspect.
Okay, Miguel. You're free to go. Just make sure we get his name to burglary, okay?
You got it.
So we're still at the beginning. Who confronted Donald Zampa? It wasn't Miguel. Then who was it?
Over the next few days, no new leads materialize.
Everyone we've encountered so far who could be, might be the guy is not the guy. The only good news is Zampa continues to live.
So in a case like this, to have a gunshot wound that goes through your back and then out your chest, it's really a miracle that an organ or the spinal cord wasn't struck. Every organ's right next to each other. So to make it from one side to the other without hitting one of those and killing you is a matter of inches that saves this man's life.
Well, as police are getting frustrated about the lack of leads in this case, they do get some good news, and that's that Donald did well in surgery and he's gonna survive. So that's great. But this is gonna be something that changes his life forever. He's probably obviously gonna suffer the physical effects of what happened to him, but emotionally, can you imagine the fact that not only did this happen to me, but whoever did it to me is still out there, hasn't been found. They still don't know why it happened to me. It'd be the kind of thing that probably for the rest of your life, you'd always be looking over your shoulder, wondering, you know, could something like this happen to me again? It would be a very fearful, life-changing experience that, yes, I recovered from it physically, I survived, but emotionally, it's always gonna be in my mind and a part of my life.
But an unexpected tip is about to send the case in a whole new direction.
Sir, there's a call for you. Somebody from Cincinnati. Want to talk about the Zampa case?
Cincinnati? Which line?
2.
It is unusual to get a call from another state about a case that's only a few days old in your city. That is a real indicator that whoever is on the other end of that phone has some direct knowledge.
Sergeant Kenda, who am I speaking to?
Hello, sir. Yes, my name's Charles Norton. I'm calling because my stepson has something he needs to talk to you about regarding the shooting the other night.
And who's your stepson?
His name is Chris Powell.
Chris Powell, huh?
That name hit me like a slap in the face. You mean the nervous little kid that was at the crime scene?
Hello?
We were suspicious at the time that Mr. Powell knew more than he was saying, and we were right. So the phone rings, and it's a call from Cincinnati, Ohio, and it is a wealth of information.
Chris is Sergeant Kenda. You remember me?
Yes.
And you have something you need to tell me?
Christopher.
You can hear in the background his stepfather basically saying, you either tell the truth or you're out on your ear and you have no place to go.
I didn't tell you the whole story.
I didn't think so, Christopher, so here is your second chance to be truthful.
The other night, when I said I was at home, I was actually headed home with a friend of mine.
He identifies his friend as Rodney McFarland. He's 21 years old.
Mr. McFarland, he's a white guy?
Yes, sir.
We're kind of questioning this because we're looking for Hispanic male.
All right, so what happened?
Well, Rodney was driving. No. What's wrong, man? And as soon as we pulled up on the San Miguel, the car stalled. Oh, no, come on, you piece of crap.
Rodney's upset because he didn't have any money to fix this car to make it run. And they both see this guy coming toward them on the sidewalk, wearing a suit and tie, and he's obviously drunk.
Look at this fool.
Rodney turns to Powell and says, I'm gonna get this guy. I'm gonna rob him and take his money.
Oh, you can't just rob the guy, you know? What if you get caught, huh? Don't worry. This guy's my voice. And he told me he was gonna speak in a Hispanic accent, so the guy wouldn't be able to identify him.
Chris Powell's explanation for the accent gives newfound credibility to his story.
The only person who knew that was the victim, and the only way you could know it is if you were standing there like you said you were. I absolutely believe Mr. Powell has come forward, finally, with the truth.
So what happened next?
Well, he ran up to the guy. I heard a bang, and I just started running. You know, now listen, I tried to do the right thing, you know, by calling the police. It's just that I got a little scared afterwards. So, I'm back here with my folks in Cincinnati.
Chris wanted to do the right thing, and he maybe needed that extra support from his family to come forward and give that information.
Despite Chris Powell's story, there's still one detail that doesn't add up.
Do you know why Rodney shot the victim instead of taking his money?
I don't know. I couldn't even believe he did it.
So do you know where the gun is?
Yeah. He told me he keeps it in this, like, big case for cassettes. It's probably in his room somewhere.
Where's Rodney live?
We're able to obtain a warrant for the arrest of Rodney, and we go to that residence in an effort to execute that warrant.
You make an assumption that Rodney is armed and he's going to resist, so you approach guns drawn.
Wait, hey.
We're looking for Rodney McFarland.
My brother? He ain't here.
You sure about that? Harboring a fugitive's a felony.
Mr. McFarland, where is your brother?
If Joe Kenda tells you you're going to tell me where Rodney is, you're going to tell him where Rodney is.
He's in the back.
Step aside.
This is a very intense and high-risk operation at this point because he could be on the other side of the door just waiting for us to come in.
Brett! This is the police! Come out with your hands where we can see them!
You don't come out, we're coming in!
And you won't like what happens next when we come in.
Let me see your hands!
I didn't mean to.
Go ahead and cuff him.
Rodney doesn't want to engage. He is just frightened.
Turn around. Where's the gun, Rodney?
I don't know. I want a lawyer.
All right, get him out of here.
Yeah. Fine. That is your constitutional right, Mr. McFarland. But right now, you're going to jail.
Let's find that gun. Hey.
We do find the gun in a cassette case, just as it was described.
This looks like a .38.
Well, that's the one. This bag, get the hell out of here.
Although Rodney McFarland refuses to talk, ballistics testing on the gun does all the talking Kenda needs.
The gun is determined to be the weapon that fired the shot that entered and exited Mr. Zompek, and further, the weapon is defective. It would easily fire without touching the trigger.
It's a defective piece of crap, is really what it comes down to. And if you think about our case, it could very well be just that. The defective gun caused this to be a shooting as opposed to just a robbery.
Evidence of a faulty gun gives Kenda a much better understanding of how events unfolded the night Zampa was shot.
Damn it. Just try turning it back on. Look, it ain't gonna work. The hell am I gonna get the money to fix this damn thing?
He's complaining that this thing is nickel and diming him to death.
And Mr. Zompek comes walking down the street in his coat and tie, and looks like he might have a few dollars on his person. McFarland has no knowledge of who Donald Zampa is or cares. He is a victim of opportunity.
Look at what he's wearing. He's definitely got some cash on him. Hey, whoa, what the hell, man? What are you doing? Don't worry. Disguise my voice. Wait, Rod, stop. Don't turn around. Whoa.
And Rodney McFarland is not Hispanic by any stretch of the imagination, but he used that accent to throw off the victim.
Keep your hands up and get on your knees. Come on, man. Okay. Now give me your...
It's an accidental discharge. McFarland is shocked that the gun goes off.
God, help me. Please.
No robbery is attempted. Now it's run away.
It wasn't his intent. It was an accident, but it was an accident committed in the course of a criminal episode, which still makes it a crime.
Rodney McFarland pleads guilty to attempted aggravated robbery and is sentenced to 10 years in prison. Chris Powell is cleared of all charges.
There is a happy ending to this story, because even though Donald had all these cards stacked against him, he survived. He went on to fully recover and happily marry and have children and grandchildren. That would give you a whole new perspective on life, I think.
Armed robbery is one of the only violent crimes where the victims are selected at random. In the case of Donald Zampa, what was his crime? Being in the wrong place at precisely the wrong moment. He's just a very lucky guy. He lived through it. Many don't.
It's getting late, and delivery man Kirk Farrell is making his last stop of the night.
Kirk Farrell is a convenience store delivery man. He goes in late nights to multiple stores, takes out the old products, bring in the new products, and he hears two cars pull up. Hey! There's a sound of a disturbance, people yelling.
Hey, dude, chill. The voices are getting more raised and the situation is getting more tense. And all of a sudden, he hears a shot. He's not gonna shoot me. God! No.
He starts to take cover behind his truck. And at that time, he hears a second gunshot.
I'm sure he was scared and very confused. It's not like he can just call 911. He's gonna have to go back into the store to do that.
Within the hour, Lieutenant Joe Kenda pulls up to the scene of the city's 23rd homicide of the year.
In 1991, we had an exceptionally high number of homicides for the size of city at that time. This particular case was one short of a record of 24 set in 1974.
Hey, Lieutenant. Hey, Gary. So what we got? We got one shooting victim, 21-year-old Todd Iverson. Kid was rushed to the hospital, but pronounced DOA. Any witnesses? Got a couple, actually, including the shooter. He's already in custody, and so's his gun. Really? Yeah, we got his friend over here in this cruiser.
It appears we have a major step up. We have the shooter, and we have the weapon.
All right, let's take a look at the scene.
We have a puddle of blood on the sidewalk in front of the main window of the store, which is apparently where this victim collapsed.
Toilet paper, huh?
Yeah, I got a T-shirt here, too.
Guy must have been hemorrhaging pretty bad.
Most likely, all of these items were used to stop the bleeding on the victim before medical arrived.
I got blood drops.
There is a pattern of blood moving toward the 2 cars in the lot.
Nice cars.
Yeah, our victim was a passenger in this car with his buddy, and our suspect was driving this car with a friend of his.
All right, I'm gonna take a look in the victim's car. Why don't you take the suspect's?
You got it.
So you have 2 sports cars where speed and power are important. It speaks to the personality of the owner.
Is this something that could possibly lead to road rage? We've seen road rage be involved in a lot of deaths and a lot of murders. Not just accidental deaths where they crash, but one guy gets mad enough to where he actually shoots at another one. This wouldn't be the first time it's happened this year. We had another case in that same year where just that happened, a road rage incident, and a guy pulls a gun out and shoots somebody. So it's quite possible that these guys were either racing, got mad at one another, maybe one cut the other off, they're playing games with the cars. The idea of road rage really does come to play, or at least the thought of it does come up when we're starting this investigation. We don't know what's going on. There's a lot of possibilities.
Looking at the interior of the car, there's no evidentiary value, nothing covered in blood. It's most likely then that our victim is shot outside of his car.
Hey, Lieutenant, come take a look at this.
Huh.
In the trunk, we find 41 expended casings neatly placed into an ammunition box.
What's the shooter's name?
Scott Sneed.
Well, Mr. Sneed obviously has experience with a gun.
It is not uncommon for people who routinely shoot. They recover their expended casings for purposes of reload.
But check this out. Kid's on the Olympic Development Shooting Team.
No kidding.
So Scott Sneed has an unusual skill in that he is a very good marksman. And he's involved in kind of that pre-Olympic program here.
This kid's probably a better shot than all of us.
Yeah.
By the time they come out of that training program, they are scary good shots. Their rate of accuracy is just incredible.
So, Mr. Sneed is very good with a gun. If he is going to shoot you, he is going to kill you. And Mr. Iverson has discovered that the hard way.
Let's go see what he has to say.
My first impression of Mr. Sneed is he's a scrawny little kid. His identification says he's 18 years old. He looks like he's 12.
What were you and your buddy up to tonight?
Well, I mean, we were just out for a late movie, and we got hungry, and we knew that this was going to be the only place that was open.
He says they were just going to run in, grab some food, and head on home.
Man, I'm starving.
Me too.
Hey. That's a good... Yeah, what? Do I know? Whoa, hey, chill, bro. What's your problem? As soon as I opened this car door, this guy just rushed me out of nowhere. I had no choice. I had to defend myself.
Okay, do you know Todd Iverson? And why would he come at you like that?
I've got no clue. I've never seen that guy before in my life.
Okay.
The mere fact that Mr. Sneed reports that he doesn't even know this guy leaves an enormous shadow of doubt in his claim of self-defense. It is not common for perfect strangers to violently assault someone they don't know upon first contact.
Kenda wonders if Scott Sneed is trying to flip the script.
People shoot people deliberately and try to call self-defense. They lie about it.
Take him down to the station.
Sir.
Wait, am I going to jail for this?
I'll be down to talk to you later.
I didn't mean to hurt the guy, I swear, okay?
Why is it that Mr. Iverson is threatening Mr. Sneed if Mr. Sneed says he doesn't know Mr. Iverson? There has to be motivation. Somebody has to believe you're their enemy.
You want to talk to the kid who was in the car with Scott?
No, let's send him down to the station. I'll talk to him later. He's probably just going to back up his friend's story anyhow. I want to talk to the kid that was in the victim's car.
Kenda is hoping Todd Iverson's friend can shed some light on what the issue between Scott and Todd was all about.
So what's your name, son?
Joe Fleming.
How old are you?
I am 17. How's Todd?
Well, I'm sorry to say he's not going to make it.
When I found out Todd died, it was a shock. Just couldn't believe it. Unreal at that point.
And I know this is difficult, but can you tell us how you knew Todd?
Yeah, grew up together.
I met Todd in the neighborhood because I saw him riding by and on a nice BMX bike. So I jumped on my bike and went out and got to talking from there and just hit it off.
But after Todd graduated, he moved to Arizona for trade school.
So what was he doing here now?
Just visiting. He got into town a few days ago. Tonight we were just celebrating him being home.
We're all pretty excited to get all back together again and hang out. Our group of friends were just real tight.
Tonight was awesome, man. I really missed you guys.
We missed you too. I told Bob I was gonna convince you to stay for good this time.
You could try. Hey, man, pull over right here. Let's get more beer.
Todd's the liquor source. He's 21. He can buy alcohol.
When we pulled in, I recognized the car in front of us. Hey, that's Sneed's car.
Oh, really? Let's get him.
I'm hungry, man.
Me too.
But that movie was really good. Yeah? Do I even know you? Oh, hey, chill out, bro. What's your... Hey!
Todd did throw a punch at Scott, but missed. Didn't hit him.
So what was the deal between Todd and Scott?
Todd?
Yeah, why did Todd hate Scott?
Todd, he doesn't even know Scott. I'm the one who hates Scott.
So we are thinking random act of violence doesn't make any sense. Well, now it makes sense. Now it makes perfect sense. We're investigating the death of 21-year-old Todd Iverson. We were skeptical when our suspect, Scott Sneed, said he didn't know Mr. Iverson, but maybe he really didn't know him. We need to rethink that.
So, Joe, you're the one who has a problem with Scott. What's it over?
Well, his girlfriend Nikki is best friends with my girlfriend, but he's no good to her.
Joe is not at all keen on how Scott treats his girlfriend.
The other night, he had Nikki crying, and my girlfriend calls him to tell him off.
My girlfriend was arguing with him over the phone, back and forth, and that's when I heard the threats.
He said he would kick my girlfriend's ass if she came between him and Nikki. I would have knocked him out had he said that in front of me.
Scott made me mad. I really didn't care for the way he treated his girlfriend and the way he was talking to mine.
At the root of all of this is the normal high school drama that goes on between boys and girls. It was nothing. Perception, believed slight, perceived bad behavior, all that sort of thing. That's all.
So if Scott's problems with you, why did Todd go after him?
I mean, I told Todd about Scott and all that he had done. And I guess he had had a few beers.
Todd understood that Joe didn't like Scott. And he's probably the leader of this little clique and probably the enforcer should something go wrong.
He was jumping out to protect my honor.
So what happened when Todd got out of the car?
Todd took a swing at Scott, and I got out to defuse the situation.
And at that point, Scott had already pulled out a handgun.
Hey, back off, bro.
Whoa! Dude, come on, let's go. Let's forget about it.
He fired a shot, went between us, which, I backed off from there. I told Todd, come on, let's not do this. But Todd stayed there.
I'm walking away. Next thing I know, I hear another gunshot. And now Todd's covered in blood.
At that moment, I was very upset. Did not have a reason to pull out a gun. Worst thing that probably would have happened that night was a little fight.
I understand how you feel. Thanks for your cooperation. Sorry about your friend.
Joe Fleming's story is eye-opening and ultimately lends credence to Scott Sneed's claim of self-defense.
Mr. Iverson is much bigger than Mr. Sneed. His size alone would strike fear into the heart of an 18-year-old kid.
However, there is still one issue keeping Kenda on the fence.
Now, a marksman like Scott's going to hit exactly what he aims for. And he shot him dead.
I know. I think he would have shot him in a non-lethal area.
And you know what? Maybe he did.
Where is this victim shot? It's a demonstration of intent.
As the sun rises, Kenda heads to the morgue in search of some answers.
So the bullet perforated his right lung. He died relatively quickly.
Okay, where was the entrance wound?
Well, that's what's interesting. The bullet entered at his right shoulder, hit the clavicle, ricocheted downward into the lung. See right here where it fractured the clavicle?
Yeah, that makes all the difference.
The shooter, in this case, a competitive trained shooter, can make that bullet go anywhere. And yet he selects the upper right shoulder. It is mere accident that the bullet happened to strike the clavicle and ricochet, lacerating the lung and killing the guy. Had that round been a half-inch lower or a half-inch higher, it would have been an entry-exit gunshot wound, treatable with the Band-Aids.
So Scott was intentionally trying not to kill him. All right, thanks, Doc.
Yeah, good luck, man.
Kenda now wants to talk with Scott to see if his story does in fact line up with what he's just learned.
I want to talk to Scott some more about precisely what he did when he decided to level that weapon at his opponent. That's the key to this case. That's the key.
How you doing, Scott?
Not so good. That guy died?
Yeah, he did.
Scott, do you know where you shot Todd?
Well, I was aiming for his shoulder, but I mean, if he died, then... What, did I miss? I mean, it's like I told you before, I didn't mean to kill anybody, I swear.
I believe you, Scott. And no, you didn't miss.
He aims for a non-vital area. He hits what he's shooting at, but more importantly, he only fires one shot. He's not out of control. He's not emptying the gun into this guy. He is trying to stop his advance.
At this point, Kenda has a clear picture of what happened that night.
Two cars, by fate, by karma, by whatever means, show up in the same place at the same time. Mr. Iverson, at this point in his life, had enough alcohol in him to provide him with a motive to demonstrate his machismo. Oh yeah? That's the guy that did that? Well, I'm going to teach that boy a lesson.
Hey! I'll help you?
Todd tries to strike you. He actually misses.
Hey, chill out, bro. What's your problem? Hey, you want something? Hey, Todd, get off me, bro. Hey, back up, bro. Hey, what are you gonna do with that, huh? What are you gonna do? Back up!
Scott, in fear of his own personal safety, fires a warning shot to try to tell Todd to back off and stop.
Mr. Iverson, the victim, ignores. He continues his behavior.
Back up, man. Just forget about it. He's not gonna shoot me. I'm telling you, stop!
Mr. Sneed pulls up that gun and puts one in his right shoulder. It hits a bone and it ricochets exactly the wrong direction and cuts his lung in half and kills him.
He didn't give me a choice, man. He didn't give me a choice, man. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Come on, man. Come on. It's gonna be all right. It's gonna be all right. Hey, here. Go. Don't close your eyes. Wake up. Come on, go get something. This is not gonna be enough.
He did take his shirt off and throw it towards me.
Hey, so much. Here.
Scott had a noble reaction. He really was trying to do what he could to undo what he'd just done.
He's not dancing with joy that he has shot his enemy. That certainly speaks volumes about Mr. Sneed's intent.
I can't believe I killed him. So what's gonna happen to me?
Well, we're gonna have to figure that out.
Scott Sneed is charged with manslaughter. But when the district attorney takes the case to a grand jury, they come to a different conclusion.
The grand jury comes back indicating that they did not feel that Scott acted in a criminal manner, but he acted in self-defense. So all charges were dropped.
Unfortunately for Scott, he couldn't overcome the magnitude of what happened that fateful night.
Mr. Sneed, As it turned out, at the age of 26, committed suicide as a result of depression.
Scott Sneed apparently was a very genuine young man. That's not to say he was perfect, but when he knew he had injured someone with his gun much more seriously than he ever intended to, he went to great lengths to try to help the young man, to help Todd, who was bleeding profusely. His conscience drove him then, and his conscience indeed might have driven him to his death, because even though the law called the homicide justifiable, he struggled with the death that he knew he committed. He shut down all of his practices. He shut down his dreams and his hopes to be a marksman. He was trying to punish himself, even perhaps, to take away something in his own life to somehow feel a little bit better about the horrible thing he did. He obviously was not able to succeed in getting past what he saw as such a horror at his own hand. Scott Sneed had a very strong conscience, and that conscience seemed to never let him go. I am sure that year after year he tried to put that remorse behind him, but that one horrible, bloody night took it all away from him. He became demoralized in the years after that shooting, and as a result of that, he also became very, very depressed. And it's quite likely that in an attempt to end all that, to rid himself of his emotional pain, took his own life.
It really is tragic that Todd didn't make it. It was also tragic for Scott. And, you know, a tiny bit of luck could have changed this so much.
It was a sound that had been absent from Oak Ridge for years. The crackle of police radios, the shuffle of boots on gravel, the hum of nervous whispers circulating around the small town. It had been 18 years since Sarah Winters disappeared, but when her remains were found in a ravine just miles from where she had last been seen, the silence was shattered. Oak Ridge wasn't a big town. It wasn't the kind of place where things like this happened, where a 16-year-old girl simply disappeared without a trace. The community was tight-knit, everyone knew each other, and in a place like this, secrets didn't stay hidden for long. But Sarah's disappearance had defied explanation. It had haunted the town for years. Her smiling face still appeared on old missing posters, crumbling now with age, tucked into forgotten corners of Oak Ridge's public spaces. Her mother, Ellen Winters, had never stopped hoping, never stopped searching. But as the years passed, even she had started to wonder if she'd ever get an answer. For nearly 2 decades, Sarah's case had gone cold. The investigation had turned up no leads, no suspects, no breakthroughs. It was as if the earth had swallowed Sarah whole, leaving nothing behind but the pain of her family and the unanswered question: what had happened to Sarah Winters? The sheriff's department had exhausted every possible avenue, but every lead seemed to fizzle out like smoke in the wind. The case was closed, put on the back shelf, and Oak Ridge slowly returned to its quiet, unassuming life. The tragedy of Sarah's disappearance was a distant memory for most, a shadow that flickered now and then, but never seemed to have much weight. Then came the call. A local fisherman, out for his usual afternoon cast, had found something. A body hidden in the dense woods at the edge of town. It was Sarah. After 18 long years, the town finally had an answer. But the discovery brought with it more questions than answers. Sarah's remains were found just a mile from her home, buried in a shallow grave beneath thick brush. She hadn't been in the woods alone. Someone had put her there, and that someone had been living among them. The town went into a collective shock. Sarah Winters, the girl who had been forgotten by time, was suddenly back in the forefront of their minds. Her mother, Ellen, was beside herself, her emotions torn between relief and grief. The pain of not knowing had been excruciating, but the knowledge that Sarah's body had been found, so close, so near, was a gut punch that felt worse than the original disappearance. At least before, there had been hope. Now the truth had arrived, and it was worse than anyone could have imagined. The discovery was made even more unsettling by the fact that Sarah's remains weren't the only things that had been found. Tucked away, buried beside her in the shallow grave, was a small, weathered notebook. A journal, and the words written inside would change everything. The journal was filled with scribbled thoughts, fragmented sentences, and eerie details. The writing was shaky at first, as though the author were hesitant, afraid of what they were revealing. But as the pages progressed, it became clearer. Sarah had been kept alive for weeks, maybe longer, and in those weeks she had written down her every fear, every moment of terror. She had been kept captive, isolated from the world she knew. She had been watched, hunted, and, in her final moments, had tried to escape. The journal mentioned someone, a name Sarah had written down multiple times. David. The entries became frantic as Sarah spoke of him, describing his obsession with her, his constant presence in the background, watching her every move. She had written about the times he had followed her home from school, about the strange, unsettling feeling she got whenever she was near him. But there was more, much more. In the last pages of the journal, Sarah had written about a confrontation, a fight, and then silence. David! The name echoed in Sarah's mind. She had seen it once before, in the early investigation, but there had been no connection to Sarah's disappearance. David Blackwood, a local boy, 18 years old at the time. He had been a quiet, shy kid, someone who had never drawn much attention to himself. He had lived in Oak Ridge his whole life, just like Sarah, but no one had ever suspected him of being anything other than a troubled teenager. After Sarah disappeared, he had been questioned, but like many others, he had been cleared. No one had ever seriously looked at him again. But now, with the journal in hand, Sarah knew. David Blackwood was the key to this case. He had been stalking Sarah, watching her, and when she tried to escape, he had killed her. It had to be him. No one else made sense. But what was the motive? Why had David done this? What had driven him to abduct Sarah, to keep her hidden for so long, and to finally take her life? These questions burned through Sarah's mind as she picked up the phone. There was no time to waste. She had to get answers. The investigation was reopening, and this time it was going to be different. They would not let this case slip into obscurity again. Detective Rachel Adams, who had been a rookie officer when Sarah disappeared, was now the lead investigator. This case had haunted her too. She had seen it all. Missing persons, unsolved crimes, dead ends. But this case, this one, had stayed with her. She had always believed that something had gone wrong, that the truth had slipped through their fingers in the early days. Now, with the discovery of Sarah's remains and the journal, Rachel knew she was closer than ever to the truth. The first thing Rachel did was pull up David Blackwood's file. He was still living in Oak Ridge, still keeping to himself, still moving through life unnoticed. He had never left town. Rachel tracked him down and paid him a visit, her mind racing with possibilities. She had no proof, but she had a feeling. The way Sarah's journal had described him, the way he had been watching her, keeping her close. It was all too much to ignore. David's house was small, nestled at the edge of town. The same house he'd grown up in. Rachel knocked on the door. There was a long pause before it creaked open. David stood there, his face pale, his eyes empty. "I know who you are," Rachel said. "I need to talk to you about Sarah Winters." David's face went slack, his eyes darting to the side. He didn't say anything. His silence spoke louder than any words could. "I know what you did, David." Rachel continued, her voice steady. "I know you were the last person to see her. I know you were stalking her before she disappeared." David swallowed hard, his gaze shifting toward the floor. He said nothing. "I know you took her." Rachel pressed. "And I know what happened to her. You don't have to say anything, but the truth is coming out. Sooner or later we'll get you. Tell me what happened." David's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, Rachel saw a flicker of emotion in his eyes, a flicker of something darker. His lips parted as though to speak, but no words came out. He turned away, pacing back into the house, leaving Rachel standing at the door. The case had started to unravel, and as Rachel stepped over the threshold, she knew there was no turning back. David Blackwood was about to confess, but what would he say? Would he give them the truth? Or would they be left with more questions than answers? The town of Oak Ridge had lived in the shadow of Sarah Winter's disappearance for far too long, but now the darkness was being pierced by the light of truth. The killer was about to be exposed. But as Rachel followed David into the house, she couldn't help but wonder, was he the only one involved? Was there more to this story than she realized? The answers were just within reach, but the story was far from over. David Blackwood's house was dim, the curtains drawn tight against the fading light of the afternoon. The stale air inside felt stifling as Rachel stepped further into the cramped living room. Dust clung to the furniture, untouched for what looked like years, a reflection of the isolation David had built around himself. It wasn't much, just a few old chairs, a coffee table cluttered with forgotten objects, and an aging television screen in the corner. But the emptiness of the place spoke volumes. It was the home of a man who had long ago retreated from the world, into the shadows of his own making. David didn't say anything as he led Rachel inside, his face pale, his eyes never quite meeting hers. He shuffled around, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. There was something unsettling about the way he moved, nervous, almost like a trapped animal. Rachel's instincts were sharp, and she could feel the tension in the room, thick as smoke. Something was wrong here. David knew more than he was letting on. Rachel stood at the threshold of the living room, watching David, waiting for him to speak. The silence between them felt unbearable. After a few moments, she finally broke it. "David," she began, her voice firm but calm, "I need you to listen to me. I know you were involved in Sarah Winter's disappearance. I know you've been hiding the truth for years." David flinched at her words, a shudder passing through his frame. His eyes flickered to the floor as if the weight of the accusation was too much to bear. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," David muttered, his voice barely audible. "I never wanted her to get hurt. I didn't know what to do." Rachel's gaze sharpened. "What do you mean? You didn't know what to do? David, you took her. You kept her hidden, and you killed her. That's the truth. You're not the victim here, and neither is she. Sarah's family has waited for answers for 18 years. Don't make them wait any longer." David's hand trembled as he reached up to wipe his brow, his breath quickening. The cracks in his composure were beginning to show. Rachel could feel the walls starting to come down. He was afraid. And that fear, that guilt, was the key to breaking him. I didn't want to hurt her," David said again, his voice breaking. "I didn't want to kill her. I didn't know how to make it stop. I just wanted to keep her close, to keep her to myself." Rachel stepped closer, her voice steady and unwavering. "Why Sarah? Why her? You didn't just take her, David. You kept her hidden for weeks. You tortured her. What did you think you were going to do with her? Why did you think you had the right to take her life?" David's eyes welled up with tears, and for the first time, he looked directly at Rachel. His face twisted with emotion, a mixture of shame, fear, and something darker, something Rachel couldn't quite place. He opened his mouth, as if to speak, but nothing came out. "I was alone," he finally whispered, his words heavy with despair. "I had no one. And then I saw her. I saw how perfect she was, how much she meant to everyone around her. She was beautiful, and she didn't even know me. I wanted her to love me. I wanted to be someone she noticed. I thought if I could just get her to be close to me, to stay with me, I could make everything right." Rachel's heart pounded in her chest as she processed his words. The desperation in his voice, the raw emotion. David had been consumed by his obsession. He had seen Sarah as something to possess, to control. She hadn't been a person to him. She had been an object, something to be owned. And when she had tried to escape, when she had fought for her life, that was when everything had gone wrong. "You kept her locked away, didn't you?" Rachel said softly, her voice almost sympathetic. "In the basement. You kept her hidden, thinking she would stay there forever. But when she tried to fight back, when she tried to leave..." David's face crumpled. He squeezed his eyes shut, as though the memory was too painful to bear. She wanted to leave me. She didn't understand. She didn't know what I was trying to do. She wouldn't stay, and I couldn't let her go. Rachel's stomach twisted with disgust. She could hear the madness in David's voice, the distorted reasoning that had led him to this point. This wasn't just a simple crime of passion. This was something deeper, an obsession, an unrelenting need to control and dominate another person. And when Sarah had refused, when she had fought him, David had snapped. David's face went pale, his lips trembling. "I didn't mean to kill her. I didn't. But she wouldn't listen. She kept trying to leave. And I..." He stopped, shaking his head, his voice faltering. "I just wanted her to stay. I didn't know what else to do." "Where is she, David?" Rachel asked, her voice hard now, urgent. "Where is Sarah?" David looked up at her, his eyes filled with tears. For a moment, he seemed to shrink in on himself, as if the weight of the question was too much to bear. Finally, in a broken voice, he whispered, "She's in the woods, behind my house." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She had suspected it, but hearing it from David's lips sent a chill through her. The woods. Just a short walk from his house? How had they missed it all these years? How had no one ever thought to search there? "Tell me exactly where," Rachel pressed, her voice sharp, her urgency rising. "I need to know. Now!" David swallowed hard, his hands shaking. "It's just a little way behind the house, in the trees. There's a small clearing. He stopped, his face contorting with guilt. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I didn't want her to die. I just wanted her to stay, to love me." Rachel didn't wait for him to say any more. She turned on her heel, motioning for the officers who had been standing guard at the door. "Get the search teams. We're heading out now." As she made her way back to the door, her mind raced. They had finally found the truth, the one piece of the puzzle that had been missing all these years. David Blackwood had taken Sarah Winters. He had kept her hidden for weeks. And when she had tried to escape, when she had fought back, he had taken her life. But there was more to it than just one victim. Sarah's death had been a warning. There were others. More girls who had been taken, more lives that had been stolen, and the truth about them had been buried along with Sarah's body. Rachel's thoughts churned as she stepped out into the cold night air. The town of Oak Ridge had been living in the shadow of Sarah Winters' disappearance for far too long, and now that shadow was lifting. But what would they find when they looked deeper? What other secrets had been buried beneath the surface? She didn't know yet, but she knew one thing for sure. The case was far from over. As Rachel climbed into her car and the engine roared to life, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were only beginning to scratch the surface. They had found Sarah. They had found David. But the rest of the story, the rest of the victims, was still out there, hidden, waiting to be uncovered. and Rachel was going to make sure they found every last one of them. The woods behind David Blackwood's house were thick with underbrush, the kind of tangled mess that made every step feel like a battle. The search team spread out, their flashlights cutting through the heavy darkness that seemed to envelop them. It was cold, the air sharp with the bite of winter, but Rachel barely noticed the chill. She was focused entirely on the task at hand. They had a location, a place where David had said he buried Sarah Winters all those years ago. She couldn't let herself think about the gravity of it. She couldn't let herself feel the weight of the years that had been wasted, the families that had been left in the dark. Not now, not until they found what they came for. The officers worked silently, each one understanding the urgency of the moment. There was no time to waste. They had to find Sarah. They had to find the proof that would tie David Blackwood to her death. Rachel's thoughts raced as she moved through the woods, her mind still reeling from the conversation she'd had with David. He had confessed, but his confession was riddled with holes. His justification was nonsensical, an obsession, a twisted love. But there was something more. He had said that Sarah tried to leave, tried to escape. What had happened in those final moments? How had he ended her life? As they pushed further into the trees, Rachel's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't shake the image of Sarah's journal, the words Sarah had written down in the weeks leading up to her death. "He's always watching me," she had written. "I don't think I can get away." Sarah had known, even then. She had known that she wasn't going to escape. The idea that a young girl, full of promise and life, had been trapped in the basement of David Blackwood's home, writing down her last fears, was almost too much for Rachel to bear. But it wasn't just Sarah. If David had been hiding his obsession with Sarah for so long, who else had he hurt? The search team paused in the clearing behind David's house. One of the officers, a young detective named Chris, knelt down beside a patch of earth, his hand hovering just above the ground. Rachel's breath caught in her throat as she walked over, knowing they were close. Chris looked up, his face grave. "We found something," he said softly. "Over here." Rachel moved quickly, her legs brushing against the damp leaves as she knelt beside him. The earth had been disturbed, but it didn't look like a recent burial. The soil was dark, compacted, the kind of earth that had been sitting for years. Rachel's stomach twisted as she inspected the area. They had been looking for Sarah's body, but now, standing in the woods, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more waiting beneath the surface, something more that they weren't prepared for. "Start digging," Rachel ordered, her voice steady but filled with urgency. The officers began to clear the area, their tools slicing through the soil. As the dirt was removed, the shape of something solid began to emerge. A box. A small, weathered wooden box, half buried in the ground. Rachel's heart raced as she watched them pull it free from its hiding place. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. She had no idea what was inside, but she knew one thing for sure. This was the key to everything. "Careful," Rachel said as the officers moved the box. "Let's make sure we don't disturb anything else." With slow, methodical movements, the officers opened the box. Inside, wrapped in old, stained cloth, was a collection of items. A ring, a few pieces of jewelry, and tucked at the bottom, a crumpled photograph. Rachel's hands shook as she reached for it, her heart racing. She unfolded the photograph slowly, her eyes scanning the image. It was a picture of a girl, young, maybe 13 or 14, standing outside a house, smiling brightly. She looked familiar, but Rachel couldn't place her at first. And then it hit her. It was another missing girl, a girl from a neighboring town, Emily Parker. She had disappeared 5 years before Sarah, and her case had gone cold, just like Sarah's. No one had ever found any clues. No one had ever connected her to anyone in Oak Ridge. But here she was, in this box, with Sarah Winter's remains. Rachel's mind raced as she pieced the connection together. David Blackwood hadn't just been stalking Sarah Winters. He had been stalking other girls, too. He had been collecting them, keeping mementos of each of his victims. The box was his twisted trophy case, each item a reminder of a life he had taken and kept hidden. "Jesus," Rachel muttered, her voice trembling. This isn't just about Sarah. There are others." Chris looked at her, his face pale. "How many, Rachel? How many girls?" Rachel didn't answer right away. She couldn't. She didn't have the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a case about a single murder. This was about a predator who had been operating for years, someone who had been able to blend into the town, unnoticed for far too long. And now, after everything they had uncovered, the question remained. How many more victims were out there? The team worked quickly to secure the box, documenting everything they had found. The photograph of Emily Parker. The ring, perhaps belonging to another victim. There were more missing persons to connect, more stories to unravel. But before Rachel could process it all, her phone rang. It was Detective Mark Jenkins, one of her colleagues. "Rachel, we've got a development." Mark's voice crackled over the phone. "You need to get back to the station. We've pulled the old missing persons files for the other towns nearby. We've found more connections, more girls who went missing, and they all have ties to David. This thing is bigger than we thought." Rachel's stomach dropped. The implications of what Mark was saying were chilling. David Blackwood had been active for much longer than anyone had realized, targeting young girls in different towns, making them disappear. He had been working under the radar, his obsession growing year after year. And now, with Sarah Winter's death, the floodgates had opened. But the question remained, why had he kept his secret for so long? "Are you sure?" Rachel asked, her voice steady, though her mind was racing. "How many more?" "We're still going through the files," Mark said. "But we've identified 3 other girls, from different towns, all of whom disappeared around the same time Sarah did, and there are more leads coming in." Rachel's mind was spinning. She had known there was something off about David, but this was far worse than anything she had imagined. He wasn't just some random killer. He was part of a much larger pattern, and he had been careful enough to evade capture for years. The thought made Rachel sick. She had to get back to the station, but she didn't know what she was walking into. The discovery of Sarah Winters had been the beginning, not the end. "Thanks, Mark," Rachel said, hanging up. She turned back to the officers, who were still working around the box and the remains. "We need to get back. We're not done here. There's more to this. There's always been more." As she walked away, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something far more horrifying than they had anticipated. They had found Sarah. They had found David. But the real danger was just beginning to surface. In the coming days, the investigation would uncover the extent of David Blackwood's crimes, the terrifying breadth of his obsession, and the twisted trail of destruction he had left behind. But for now, all Rachel could do was take one step at a time, knowing that every answer they uncovered only led to more questions. And somewhere in the darkness, the true horror of David's reign of terror was still out there, waiting to be exposed. The station was alive with activity when Rachel returned, the urgency of the case pressing in on her from all sides. The discovery of Sarah Winter's remains had sent shockwaves through Oak Ridge, but as Rachel sat down at her desk, the full weight of what they had uncovered began to hit her. The box, the journal, the photograph of Emily Parker. It was clear now that David Blackwood hadn't just been hiding one victim, he had been hiding a collection of them, like trophies stacked in the shadows of his twisted mind. And the worst part? He had gotten away with it for years. He had been living among them, invisible, blending in as if nothing was wrong. As Rachel began to review the files that Mark had sent over, the connections between the missing girls became increasingly evident. Emily Parker, Sarah Winters. 2 names that had once been forgotten, lost in time, but now they were tied together by the darkness of David Blackwood's obsession. The photograph found in the box was just the beginning. Rachel knew that if they were going to solve this case, they needed to dig deeper. They needed to find the missing girls, find the links between them, and uncover the full scope of David's crimes. She wasn't alone in this. Mark had already pulled together a team to go through the records, to piece together every connection, every pattern. But as Rachel looked around the room, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the task before them. The investigation had shifted from a missing persons case to something far darker, something much bigger than she had initially imagined. The phone on Rachel's desk buzzed, and she picked it up without hesitation. "Detective Adams," she answered, her voice focused. "Rachel, it's Mark," came the familiar voice on the other end. "We've got something. Another lead just came in. A woman named Joan Harris. She's come forward. She's claiming her daughter, Lily, went missing in 1997, and she's sure David Blackwood was involved." Rachel's pulse quickened. Another one? The connections were starting to pile up faster than she could process. She had been afraid of this, that David's reign of terror had gone on longer than anyone knew. "Where is she?" Rachel asked, already standing up and grabbing her coat. "I'll head over there right now. She's waiting for you at her home," Mark replied. "She's been sitting on this for years, but she finally decided to come forward after hearing about Sarah Winters. She believes her daughter was another one of David's victims." "All right, I'm on my way," Rachel said, hanging up the phone. The wheels were turning in her mind. Another missing girl. Another name to add to the list. It wasn't just Sarah Winters anymore. The pattern was emerging. David Blackwood had taken more lives, and now they had to find them all. The drive to Joan Harris's house was short but tense. Rachel's mind was consumed with questions. Could this be the breakthrough they had been waiting for? Joan Harris had waited years to come forward. What had made her decide to speak now? And what was it that had finally pushed her to speak the truth about her daughter's disappearance? When Rachel arrived at the Harris home, she was greeted by a woman in her late 40s, her face lined with years of grief and uncertainty. Joan Harris had a tiredness in her eyes, a weariness that spoke of years spent searching, waiting, hoping for a resolution that never came. "Detective Adams, thank you for coming," Joan said, her voice wavering slightly as she opened the door. "Please come in." Rachel stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. The house was quiet, filled with the remnants of a family's life. A few pictures hung on the walls, but most of the space felt empty, as if the years of loss had hollowed out the place. Joan led Rachel into the living room, where she took a seat across from her, her hands shaking slightly. "Tell me about your daughter, Lily," Rachel said gently. She could feel the weight of Joan's grief in the air, but she had to keep focused. There were answers to be found. Joan nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Lily was 14 when she disappeared. She was bright, full of life. She was always so friendly with everyone. She had a lot of friends, and she was close with Sarah Winters. They used to walk home together. I think they were even planning to meet up that day, the day Sarah disappeared. It was so sudden, so out of nowhere. We didn't know where to begin looking. And then, just like that, we lost her." Rachel's heart clenched as she listened. The same story, the same grief. It was all too familiar. She had heard it before, and it never got any easier. Lily's disappearance was just another piece of the puzzle, another victim swallowed by the darkness. Rachel could see the connection now. Lily had been friends with Sarah, and now her mother was convinced David Blackwood had been involved. I didn't know who to trust, Detective," Joan continued, her voice breaking. "I thought about going to the police at the time, but I didn't have any proof. And then Sarah disappeared. And I kept thinking that maybe someone would figure it out, that someone would find the truth." Rachel nodded slowly, absorbing every word. "And now you think David Blackwood was involved?" Joan's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm sure of it. There were things I never understood back then. Lily started acting strangely a few weeks before she disappeared. She was quiet, distant. She wouldn't tell me what was bothering her. But one night, I overheard her talking on the phone. She was scared, Detective. She said she had seen someone watching her. She said it was David. She said he'd been following her for weeks. But I never connected it. I thought maybe she was just being paranoid. But now, with everything that's come out about Sarah, I know. I know he was the one who took her. Rachel leaned forward, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place with a terrible clarity. David Blackwood had been stalking Lily, too. He had been watching her, just like he had with Sarah, and he had taken her. The realization hit Rachel like a punch to the gut. There was no longer any doubt. David Blackwood was the link between all of these missing girls. Joan's voice shook as she spoke again. I'm not sure what else I can tell you, Detective, but I've always known in my heart that David had something to do with Lily's disappearance. And now, with Sarah's case being reopened, I just couldn't stay quiet anymore. Rachel took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had to act fast. This was it. They had the evidence they needed to connect David to more than just one disappearance. The pattern was undeniable, but there was still so much to uncover. The question now was not if David had taken more girls. It was how many, and where were they? How many families had been shattered by his obsession? Thank you, Joan, Rachel said, her voice steady. You've given us something crucial. I'm going to find out what happened to your daughter. I'm going to find out what happened to all of them. As Rachel stood to leave, Joan reached out to her, grabbing her arm gently. Please, Detective, don't let him get away with it. Don't let him hurt anyone else. Rachel nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't going to stop. She couldn't stop. There were more victims out there, more families who deserved answers, who needed to know what had happened to their daughters. The pieces were all coming together. David Blackwood was no longer just a suspect. He was the man who had terrorized Oak Ridge for years. And now Rachel was going to make sure he paid for his crimes. As she stepped out of the house and into the cold night air, Rachel's mind was focused. The investigation was far from over, but for the first time in years, she could see the finish line. David had been living in the shadows for too long. It was time to drag him into the light. Rachel's phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Mark. We've got another one, he said. A missing girl, just like the others. Same pattern, same connection. We're pulling her file now. This thing goes deeper than we thought. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. Another one. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We're on our way, she said, determination in her voice. Let's bring this to an end. The investigation had shifted from a single missing person case to a full-blown serial investigation. David Blackwood, once just another name in a quiet town, had become the epicenter of something far darker than Rachel had ever imagined. Each discovery, each new victim, brought with it a fresh wave of grief, shock, and urgency. But the more they uncovered, the more they realized just how much they still didn't know. How many more girls had disappeared over the years. How many more families had been left in the dark. Rachel had never felt the weight of a case like this before. The pressure was suffocating. Every lead felt urgent, every piece of evidence crucial. She couldn't afford to miss anything, couldn't afford to let any detail slip through the cracks. The stakes were too high. These girls had been taken by someone who knew exactly how to blend into their community. Someone who had been living in the shadows, watching them for years. But now the shadows were lifting, and David Blackwood was at the center of it all. After Joan Harris had come forward with her daughter Lily's story, Rachel had no choice but to follow the new lead. David Blackwood's connection to yet another missing person was the final piece of the puzzle, but they needed to dig deeper. They needed to find out how far back this went, how many girls had been taken, and how David had been able to slip through the cracks for so long. Rachel sat at her desk, staring at the stack of files in front of her. She hadn't slept much in the past few days, and the exhaustion was starting to show. Her eyes were heavy, her thoughts scattered, but she couldn't afford to stop. Not when there were so many questions left unanswered. Mark had already begun reaching out to neighboring police departments, cross-referencing missing persons cases with David's name. But it wasn't enough. They needed to connect the dots between David and every missing girl, every suspicious case in the region. The scale of it was overwhelming. Rachel picked up the phone, dialing Mark's number. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Rachel," Mark said, his voice crackling over the line. "I think I've found something. I've been going through the cold cases from surrounding towns, looking for more girls who fit the pattern. I found another one. A girl named Jessica Monroe. She went missing in 1996, just a year before Sarah Winters. She was last seen walking home from her friend's house, and her case has been cold ever since." Rachel's pulse quickened as she scribbled down the name. "How does this tie to David?" "Well," Mark continued, "it turns out Jessica was friends with Emily Parker, the girl in the photo we found with Sarah's remains. And guess who else was in that circle of friends? Lily Harris. The connection's starting to look too strong to ignore." Rachel felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. The pattern was emerging with terrifying clarity. David Blackwood hadn't just been targeting one girl, he'd been targeting a specific type, moving through groups of friends, picking them off one by one. And now, after all these years, the web was finally starting to come undone. "Where do we start?" Rachel asked, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "We need to talk to Jessica Monroe's family," Mark said. "They've never connected her disappearance to David, but they're still looking for answers. We need to get in touch with them, see what we can find." "I'll set up the meeting," Rachel said, already grabbing her coat. "We need to move quickly. The more we find out, the closer we are to catching him." Rachel met with Jessica Monroe's parents the following afternoon. They were older now, their faces lined with the years of grief that had taken a toll on their lives. They had never given up hope that their daughter would come home. But as the years went by, they had learned to live with the pain. Rachel could see it in their eyes. The same mixture of hope and heartbreak that every parent carries when their child is lost. "We never stopped looking," Jessica's mother, Linda Monroe, said, her voice thick with emotion. "We've been to every vigil, every search party. We've filed the reports, but nothing ever came of it. No one ever connected her disappearance to anything. We thought it was just some random tragedy." Rachel sat across from them, trying to find the right words. "I know this is difficult, but we believe there's a connection between Jessica's case and several other disappearances in the area. We think David Blackwood might be responsible for her abduction." The words hung in the air like a bombshell. Linda's face drained of color, her hands trembling as she reached for the tissue box on the table. Her husband, Robert, looked at Rachel with a mix of disbelief and fear. "David Blackwood?" Robert whispered, his voice barely audible. "But he's just quiet. He's always kept to himself. He's never seemed like someone who would do something like this." "I know this is hard to believe," Rachel said gently, "but we've uncovered a pattern. He's been stalking and abducting young girls for years. Jessica Monroe, she was one of his victims." Rachel sat with the Monroes for hours, gathering every detail they could remember about Jessica, about her life before she disappeared. They told her about Jessica's friends, the places she used to go, and the people she had been close to. There were no signs of anything unusual before she vanished. No red flags, no warning signs. Jessica had just disappeared, like Sarah Winters, like Emily Parker. The same story, over and over again. When Rachel left the Monroes' house, her mind was spinning. She had heard this story so many times before, but this time the connection was undeniable. David Blackwood had been in their lives, in their circles, moving through the shadows like a predator, and no one had seen it coming. The realization hit Rachel like a wave, drowning her in the weight of it all. But as she drove back to the station, Her phone rang again. It was Mark. "Rachel, we've got another one. A girl named Amanda Pierce. She went missing in 1998, just a few years after Jessica Monroe. And guess who was in her circle of friends? Emily Parker, Lily Harris, and Jessica Monroe." Rachel slammed on the brakes, the world around her going still for a moment. This wasn't just one isolated incident. This was a pattern, a horrifyingly systematic string of abductions, and the closer they got, the more disturbing it became. "I'm on my way," Rachel said, the words coming out with a sense of urgency she hadn't felt before. "We need to get everything on Amanda Pierce. This is bigger than we thought." Rachel hung up the phone, her mind racing. Every girl was connected. Every girl was part of this twisted web that David had been weaving. The more she learned, the darker it got. David Blackwood hadn't just been a predator. He had been a serial abductor, and Oak Ridge, the town that had once seemed so safe, had been hiding a monster in plain sight for years. And now it was time to make him pay. As Rachel walked back into the station, she could feel the weight of the investigation pressing on her shoulders. They were close now, so close to bringing David Blackwood to justice. But there was still so much to uncover. Still so many lives lost, so many families left in the dark. The more they uncovered, the more the horror unfolded. And Rachel knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about solving one case anymore. This was about stopping a predator before he could take anyone else. They were running out of time, but Rachel wasn't about to let David Blackwood get away with it. Not when she was so close to the truth. The air in the station was thick with anticipation as Rachel sat at her desk, sifting through the growing pile of files. The phone calls had been non-stop all morning, each one bringing in more disturbing information about David Blackwood and the girls who had vanished over the years. They had found the connection. They had found the pattern. But with each new victim they uncovered, Rachel felt a deeper sense of urgency. Amanda Pierce, Jessica Monroe, Sarah Winters, Emily Parker, the same faces, the same story, young girls who had been stolen from their families and hidden away by the one person they trusted least. David Blackwood had been operating for years, picking off girls from the small circle of friends that crossed paths in Oak Ridge and the neighboring towns. The more they uncovered, the more chilling it became. Rachel leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. The investigation had become a twisted web of lies, secrets, and misplaced trust. Every name they uncovered, every file they read, felt like another piece of a puzzle they were only just starting to see. But there were still so many unanswered questions. Why had David chosen the girls he had? Why had he waited so long to strike again? And most importantly, how had he managed to stay hidden for so many years, blending into the community, keeping his dark secret locked away? A knock on her office door broke her train of thought. Mark Jenkins, her trusted colleague, entered the room, his face tense. "Rachel, we need to talk. We've got another lead," Mark said, his voice low. "It's not good." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. Another lead? Another victim? They had barely started processing the names of the girls who had been connected to David, and now there was more. "Go ahead," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "What's going on?" "We've been going through David's old social media accounts. It wasn't something we had thought to check earlier, but now it seems like a good place to start. And Rachel, we found something disturbing." Rachel sat up straighter in her chair. "What is it?" Mark pulled a chair up to Rachel's desk and sat down, flipping open a folder. "It's not just that David was friends with these girls or that he stalked them. We found something in his online messages. He was active on a bunch of old chat forums, ones he used to visit before his social media accounts were deleted. We went back into his chat logs from 1996, and there's a name I didn't expect to see." Rachel's pulse quickened. "Who?" "Sarah Winters." Rachel froze. Sarah Winters had been gone for years, and now, after everything that had happened, the girl was appearing in David's messages? What does he say about her? Mark hesitated, then looked at Rachel. He's talking about her, Rachel. He was trying to contact her. She didn't respond, but he talked about her like she was already his, like she was a possession he was trying to claim. There's a lot in these messages, but what stands out is how he described her, like she was someone he had been watching for a long time. It's like he'd been planning this for years. Rachel felt a cold wave of realization wash over her. David had been plotting Sarah's abduction long before she disappeared, long before anyone knew that she was even on his radar. "Is there anything else?" Rachel asked, trying to steady her voice. "Yeah, there's more," Mark said. "It gets worse. We found a file on his old computer, something he had hidden, encrypted. We only cracked it open this morning. It's full of pictures, old ones, photos of girls, Sarah included, taken without their knowledge. Some of them were taken before their disappearances and others after. But here's the part that really got me. The last image in the file is a photo of Sarah Winters, taken just a few days before she vanished. It's a photo of her walking down the street, alone, like she's being followed." Rachel's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a case of a random abduction. David Blackwood had been watching Sarah for months, years possibly. He had been planning her disappearance for longer than anyone could have known. And the more Rachel uncovered, the more her own disbelief turned into something darker. Horror, realization, and fury. "They never had a chance," Rachel muttered, almost to herself. She could feel the anger rising within her as she thought about how Sarah must have felt. Alone, frightened. A young girl walking down the street, unaware that the monster she had seen only as a quiet neighbor was already stalking her. Rachel's thoughts were interrupted by a call from the coroner's office. She picked up immediately. "Detective Adams?" The coroner's voice was tight, serious. "We've finished processing the remains of Sarah Winters. I need you to come down here. There's something you need to see." Rachel's heart raced. She didn't even wait for the coroner to finish. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." She rushed out of the office, Mark close behind her. They drove to the coroner's office in silence, the weight of the case pressing down on them like a heavy fog. Rachel knew this was going to be critical. They were on the verge of something huge, something that could bring David Blackwood's reign of terror to an end once and for all. When they arrived, the coroner led them to the examination room. The smell of antiseptic and sterile equipment filled the air, but Rachel barely noticed. Her mind was on one thing: the truth. The coroner, a middle-aged man with graying hair, stood beside a table covered with a sheet. "We've completed the analysis, Detective," he said, lifting the sheet to reveal Sarah Winters' body, or what was left of it. "There's something I think you'll want to see." Rachel looked down at the body, her heart sinking as she took in the sight. It was clear Sarah had been through hell before she died. Her body had been preserved, but the damage was undeniable. The coroner pointed to a series of marks on Sarah's wrists. "She was bound," he said, his voice grim. "The bruising around her wrists indicates that she was restrained for a period of time, possibly for days, before her death." Rachel nodded. The confirmation of her captivity only solidified what she already knew. David Blackwood had kept her, locked her away, made her part of his sick, twisted world. The coroner moved on. "There's also evidence of trauma to the head. A blow, likely blunt force, was delivered to her skull. That's what killed her." Rachel's blood ran cold. David hadn't just taken her. He hadn't just held her captive. He had ended her life in the most brutal way possible. She felt sick to her stomach as the coroner continued. "There's more, though. There are traces of semen found on her clothing. It was hidden well enough that it wasn't found immediately, but it was there." Rachel's mind spun. David had violated Sarah. He had not just held her captive, but he had subjected her to unspeakable acts before ending her life. The horror was beyond comprehension. The coroner met her eyes. "We've already run the tests. The DNA matches David Blackwood." Rachel stood frozen, unable to speak. The case was no longer a mystery. It was a certainty. David Blackwood had taken Sarah Winters. He had kept her captive, violated her, and then murdered her. And now, they had the proof. Mark's voice cut through the silence. "We've got him, Rachel. We've got him." Rachel didn't respond. She was still processing the enormity of what they had uncovered. It wasn't just a case of a missing girl anymore. It was a pattern that stretched back years, one that they were just beginning to unravel. And David Blackwood, who had been living in plain sight for so long, was about to be exposed. But as Rachel walked out of the coroner's office, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. There were still so many girls out there, still so many unanswered questions. David Blackwood might be in custody, but the investigation was far from over. "Mark, get the search teams out. We're not done yet," Rachel said, her voice steady but filled with determination. Mark nodded, his expression hardening. "We'll find them, Rachel. All of them." And as Rachel walked out into the cold night air, she knew one thing for certain. David Blackwood's reign of terror was coming to an end, but the fight to uncover the full truth was just beginning. The news spread through Oak Ridge faster than Rachel had anticipated. The arrest of David Blackwood, the revelation that he had been responsible for the disappearances of multiple girls over the past 2 decades, hit the town like a bombshell. The people of Oak Ridge had long believed that Sarah Winters was the only girl to vanish without a trace, that the town had been marked by one tragic story. But now, with David's arrest, it was clear that the nightmare had been far more pervasive than anyone could have imagined. Rachel spent the next few days diving deeper into the case, but with every lead she followed, every file she examined, it became more apparent just how deeply embedded David Blackwood had been in the town's fabric. He wasn't just a local boy, he was someone whose presence had been overlooked, whose quiet demeanor had kept him under the radar. He had spent years hiding in plain sight, preying on those around him without anyone ever suspecting a thing. Rachel sat in her office late one evening, her desk covered in files and photographs, her thoughts spinning. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of the girls. Sarah, Emily, Jessica, Lily, and now Amanda Pierce. Another name she could add to the growing list. And there would be more. Rachel knew it. She could feel it in her gut. David's reign of terror hadn't stopped with Sarah Winters, and it hadn't stopped with Emily Parker. There were other victims, and they had all been silenced. But Rachel wasn't going to let their stories fade into the background again. She was going to bring every last one of them to the forefront, no matter the cost. The clock on her desk ticked relentlessly, pulling her back to reality. Mark had sent her the missing persons reports from the neighboring towns, and they were worse than she had imagined. More girls, more names. Some were older cases, but others, like Lily Harris, had only been missing for a few years. The realization hit Rachel hard. David hadn't just been targeting girls who had crossed paths with Sarah. He had been choosing them, stalking them, planning his moves like a predator in the dark. He had been watching Oak Ridge for years, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. But how had he known who to choose? What made these girls stand out to him? And why had he waited so long to act? Rachel rubbed her eyes and glanced down at the pile of files again, but before she could dive back into the endless paperwork, her phone rang. She answered quickly, eager to escape the overwhelming flood of information. "Detective Adams?" It was Mark's voice on the other end. He sounded tense. "Yeah, what's going on?" Rachel asked, already standing up, gathering her things. "We've got a problem," Mark said. "A big one." Rachel's pulse quickened. "What happened?" "We've just uncovered something about David's background. Something we missed before. I need you to come to the station right now." Rachel didn't hesitate. She grabbed her coat and headed out of the office, her mind racing. What had they missed? What else could David Blackwood possibly be hiding? She knew there was more. There had to be. When Rachel arrived at the station, Mark was waiting for her in the evidence room, his face taut with concern. He handed her a file as soon as she walked in, and Rachel immediately began flipping through the pages. At first, it looked like more of the same. a history of minor criminal activity, a few traffic violations, and a few odd jobs here and there. But then Rachel found something that made her blood run cold. A document detailing a sealed arrest record from when David was 17. The charge? Suspicion of a previous abduction attempt, but it hadn't been pursued. The victim? Another local girl who had disappeared for nearly a week before being found unharmed. The police had labeled the incident as a runaway situation and dismissed it. David had been questioned, but his alibi had checked out. And so the case was closed, just like that. Rachel's hand trembled as she looked at the document. Why wasn't this followed up? She muttered under her breath. Why wasn't David flagged? This could have saved all of those girls. Mark looked as angry as Rachel felt. The department messed up, Rachel. They had the chance to stop him, but they let him go. We missed it, and now we're playing catch-up. Rachel couldn't stomach the thought of it. How many times had David been able to slip through the cracks, unnoticed by the very people who should have been protecting these girls? The truth was starting to piece itself together, but the pieces were jagged and bloody. They had failed these victims. They had failed to stop David before he could hurt anyone else. "Where is he?" Rachel asked, her voice tight with fury. "We've got him in custody," Mark replied. "But I think we need to go deeper into his background. There's more here. A pattern we're just starting to see. We need to get a full confession out of him, and we need it soon. We're running out of time." Rachel nodded, her mind already moving to the next step. They had David. They had the evidence. Now they just needed to make sure he couldn't deny his involvement. "Let's bring him in," Rachel said, her voice resolute. It didn't take long before David Blackwood was sitting in the interrogation room again, his eyes hollow and vacant. The calm exterior he had shown in earlier interrogations was gone. His hands trembled slightly as he sat across from Rachel, as if he knew the walls were closing in around him. But Rachel wasn't going to give him any mercy. She wasn't going to let him hide behind his lies anymore. "David," Rachel began, her voice cold and steady. "We have the evidence. We know what you've done. It's time for you to face the truth." David didn't speak at first. He simply stared at the table, his lips pressed into a thin line. It was almost as if he were trying to shut the world out, to escape the reality of what was happening. But Rachel wasn't giving him that option. "We found your journals," Rachel continued. "We found the photographs. We found the DNA. We know about the girls. All of them. Sarah Winters, Emily Parker, Jessica Monroe, Lily Harris, Amanda Pierce. Your name is all over their cases, David. You've been hiding in plain sight, thinking no one would ever catch you." David shifted in his seat, his eyes flickering with something. Guilt, maybe, or fear, but he didn't speak. Rachel pressed on. "You took them, didn't you? You kept them locked away, like they were nothing more than your possessions. And when they fought back, when they tried to escape, you killed them. You didn't even hesitate. You thought you could get away with it forever, but you're not going to. Not this time." David's lips quivered. His voice came out in a hoarse whisper. "I didn't mean to. I never meant to hurt them. I just wanted them to stay." Rachel leaned in, her voice quiet but forceful. "You didn't want them to stay, David. You wanted to control them. You wanted to own them. You took their lives because they didn't belong to you. And now you're going to face the consequences of that." For a long moment, David didn't respond. His silence was suffocating. But Rachel wasn't done. She wasn't going to let him get away with this. "Tell me what happened to Sarah Winters," Rachel pressed. "Tell me what you did to her." David finally looked up at her, his eyes hollow. She was the one who fought the hardest. She wouldn't stay. She kept trying to run. Rachel leaned forward, her voice unwavering. "Tell me what happened." David's face twisted with something close to regret. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't close to enough. She tried to leave. I couldn't let her go. I had to make her stay. David muttered, his words trembling. I didn't mean for it to go that far, but I had to. Rachel's heart raced as she heard the words tumble out of his mouth, his confession ringing hollow in the silence of the room. This wasn't just a man admitting to a crime. It was the broken cry of someone who had lived in a twisted fantasy for far too long. David Blackwood had taken more than just girls. He had stolen their lives, their futures. And now, with the confession in hand, Rachel knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. The full scope of his crimes was yet to be uncovered, and with every word he spoke, the truth was beginning to piece itself together. But there was more to come. The confession had come in fragments, his words tumbling out in the quiet desperation of a man trapped by his own twisted actions. David Blackwood sat in the interrogation room, his body slumped in resignation, but his eyes, those eyes, were wide with something Rachel had never quite seen before. Fear. It wasn't the fear of being caught. That was obvious. No, it was something deeper, something darker. It was as though the walls of his own mind were starting to collapse around him, and he couldn't escape the truth he had hidden for so long. Rachel sat across from him, her pen poised above her notepad, but she wasn't writing anything. She wasn't interested in the details of his confession, not yet. She wanted to hear it all. She wanted to hear how he had justified every act of cruelty, every piece of manipulation that had stained his soul. "You kept her locked in your basement, didn't you?" Rachel asked, her voice calm but heavy with the weight of the truth. "You kept Sarah Winters there, just like the others. And when she fought back, when she tried to leave, you killed her." David nodded slowly, his fingers curling into the cuffs around his wrists, the sound of the metal scraping against the table almost unbearably loud. His gaze dropped to the table, as though he couldn't bear to look her in the eye any more. "She didn't understand. I didn't mean to. But she wouldn't stay. She kept asking me why I kept her there. I told her I loved her, that she had to stay with me, but she just didn't understand. She tried to leave. I had to stop her." Rachel's stomach twisted as she listened to him. His words were sickening, but the emptiness behind them was worse. There was no remorse, no recognition of the suffering he had caused. He wasn't sorry. He was justifying it in his own twisted way. And it wasn't just Sarah. There were more victims. So many more. Each one a name, a face, a life that had been snuffed out by his madness. "You kept her locked in that house, David." Rachel pressed, her voice unwavering. "And when you couldn't control her anymore, you killed her. That's what happened. What about the others? Emily, Jessica, Lily, Amanda. Did you do the same to them?" David flinched at the mention of their names. His eyes fluttered for a brief second, but he quickly closed them, as if to shut out the reality of it. "I never meant for it to go that far," David muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted them to stay with me. All of them. I thought, if I just kept them, everything would be okay." "Kept them? You didn't keep them, David. You tortured them!" Rachel snapped, leaning forward. "You locked them away. You took away their lives. You took away their futures. And when they tried to fight back, you killed them. And now you're sitting here, pretending like you didn't know what you were doing." David's shoulders shook slightly, but he didn't speak. His silence was deafening, and Rachel could feel the weight of it in her chest. He wasn't going to break, not easily. But Rachel wasn't about to let him off the hook. Not after everything he'd done. Not after the families he had destroyed. "You've been living in this town for years," Rachel continued, her voice low but steady. "And no one ever suspected you. You kept your secret, your twisted little world hidden in plain sight. But now, David, now the truth is out. We've got your confession. We've got the DNA. We've got everything we need to put you away for the rest of your life." David's eyes flickered up at her, his face tight with a mix of anger and something else, something far darker. "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I loved them. all of them. I thought if I could just make them stay, make them love me, everything would be fine. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Rachel couldn't contain the disgust that surged through her. You don't love people, David. You possess them. You control them. And when they try to break free, you kill them. You don't get to hide behind love. You don't get to claim you were just trying to keep them close. You are a murderer, and you're going to pay for what you've done. David's expression twisted, but still he didn't speak. He just sat there, his eyes darting to the corner of the room, as though looking for an escape that didn't exist. He had nowhere to go, no more lies to tell. The truth was out. And as Rachel stared at him, she couldn't help but think about the families, about Ellen Winters, about all the mothers who had lost their daughters to David's insidious game. The pain they must have lived with, not knowing where their children were, not knowing what had happened to them. Rachel could barely fathom it. The door to the interrogation room opened, and a uniformed officer stepped in. "Detective," the officer said quietly, "we've got an update on the forensic results. There's something you need to see." Rachel looked up, her heart rate quickening. "What is it?" "There's another body," the officer said, his voice grim. "We found remains, not far from where we found Sarah Winters. It's another one of David's victims." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. Another body, another victim. "Where?" Rachel asked, standing up, her body already moving toward the door. "Behind David's house," the officer replied. "We're processing the scene now, but it looks like this one was buried even deeper. We're just starting to piece things together." Rachel's mind raced as she followed the officer out of the interrogation room and into the hallway. The enormity of what they had uncovered was sinking in. David had been operating in plain sight for years, and now, with every new discovery, it was becoming clear just how deeply he had been embedded in the fabric of this town. No one had suspected him. No one had known the horrors he was capable of. And now, every new piece of evidence felt like another punch in the gut. When they reached the scene, the forensic team was already working, digging through the earth at the edge of the trees behind David's house. The air was damp, the ground soft with the rain from earlier that morning. Rachel stepped closer, her stomach turning as she saw the disturbed earth. This wasn't just a body. It was another piece of David's twisted legacy. As the forensic team worked to unearth the remains, Rachel's mind raced. Who was this victim? Another missing girl? Someone who had been lost to David's nightmare, just like Sarah? The realization hit her with a sickening force. They had thought they were close to solving the case, but now it seemed that the truth was only getting bigger, more grotesque, more terrifying. The body was finally uncovered, and the sight that greeted Rachel made her stomach churn. This was no accident. The girl, barely a teenager, had been carefully buried, hidden beneath layers of dirt, just as Sarah Winters had been. But unlike Sarah, this girl's remains were even more decayed, the evidence harder to discern. But the signs were there. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was another victim of David Blackwood. Rachel took a step back, her mind whirling. She had thought they were close to an end. But now it seemed like they had only begun to scratch the surface of David's horrific crimes. How many more were out there? How many more had he taken, and how long had he been operating like this? How many lives had he destroyed, and how many more had been left in his wake? David Blackwood was a predator, and Rachel was going to make sure he paid for every single life he had stolen. The truth was spreading like wildfire. Oak Ridge, a town that had lived with the scar of Sarah Winters' disappearance for nearly 2 decades, was now forced to confront a far more terrifying reality. David Blackwood wasn't just a man who had taken one girl. He had been taking them all along, hidden in plain sight. And now, with every new victim uncovered, the town was reeling. The people of Oak Ridge, who had once lived in a sense of false security, were forced to acknowledge the horrifying truth that one of their own had been operating as a predator, stalking and abducting young girls year after year. Rachel stood at the edge of the scene behind David Blackwood's house, her heart heavy with the weight of the discoveries they had made. They had unearthed another body, another name, another missing person. The forensic team had worked through the night, carefully documenting the remains, and every new piece of evidence confirmed what Rachel had feared. David Blackwood's reign of terror had spanned years, and the number of victims was rising with every passing hour. The remains found behind David's house had been hidden well, buried deep in the ground, just like Sarah's. The girl was younger, possibly 13 or 14, and the signs of trauma were unmistakable. Rachel had to swallow the bile that rose in her throat as she thought of the unimaginable suffering this girl had endured, just like Sarah had. They had thought Sarah was the last victim, the one to finally bring the truth to light. But the more they dug, the more victims they uncovered. Rachel's stomach churned as she stood over the shallow grave. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. She had to see it. She had to see the aftermath of David's madness, of his sickness. This girl, too, had been taken. This girl, too, had fought to survive, only to be silenced. "Detective Adams," Mark's voice cut through her thoughts as he approached her, his face drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes sharp with determination. "We've identified the remains. It's Michelle Davis. She was reported missing in 1997. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. Michelle Davis. Another girl from the same area, another name that had been lost in the years that had passed. Another victim whose life had been stolen. She had been missing for more than 2 decades, and now, after all this time, they had finally found her. "Damn it," Rachel muttered under her breath. "He's been doing this for years, Mark. Years, and we missed it. The whole town missed it." Mark's expression hardened. "We didn't miss it, Rachel. We didn't know. But now, we do. We've got him. We're going to bring him down." Rachel nodded, her mind spinning. But even as she tried to focus, the reality of it all settled into her bones. The horror, the terror, the unrelenting evil of what David Blackwood had done. It was overwhelming. But there was no time to dwell on it. The investigation had to continue. There were still more victims, more families to be found, more answers to uncover. And it was up to Rachel to make sure they didn't let David get away with this. "We need to get a statement from Michelle's family," Rachel said, her voice steady, despite the storm of emotions inside her. "We need to connect the dots, and we need to do it fast." Mark nodded. "I'll reach out to her parents. I'll set up the meeting. We'll get it done." Rachel turned and walked back toward the police cars, her heart heavy with the weight of the task ahead. But she wasn't done yet. She wasn't going to stop until every single victim was accounted for, until David Blackwood was behind bars and could no longer destroy lives. The days that followed were a blur of interviews, more evidence, and the slow, painful process of piecing together the story of David's crimes. Rachel spent hours at the station, sorting through files, speaking to victims' families, and following every lead she could find. But the more she dug, the more the pattern became clear. David Blackwood had been stalking these girls for years. He had been following them, watching them, and when he found the right opportunity, he had taken them, one by one. As Rachel sat in her office, staring at the photographs of the missing girls, she couldn't help but think about the families, the mothers, the fathers, who had been living with the uncertainty of their children's disappearances for so long. Sarah Winter's mother, Ellen, had been devastated by the discovery of her daughter's remains, but at least she had closure. What about the other families? What about the parents of Michelle Davis, or the other girls who had been taken by David? How many more had been lost? How many more had been waiting for answers that never came? Rachel's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Mark again, holding a new stack of papers. His face was grim. "Rachel, we've got more. It's not just Michelle Davis. We've identified another victim, Tina Roberts. She went missing in 1999, just 2 years after Michelle. And get this, she was one of Emily Parker's friends. They were in the same group." Rachel felt a cold wave of dread wash over her. It was the same story, over and over again. These girls had been connected. They had known each other, crossed paths, shared friends. David had been picking them off, one by one, isolating them from the world. But why? Why these specific girls? What made them the targets of his twisted desires? "I think we're looking at something bigger than just one killer, Rachel," Mark said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "There's a connection between them, all of them. They knew each other. They were close. And now they're all dead." Rachel nodded, her mind racing. "It's the same pattern, same connection. David Blackwood had been watching them, all of them, for years. But why? Why did he choose these girls?" Mark glanced down at the papers in his hands. "Maybe it's not just about them. Maybe it's about him." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," Mark said, shaking his head. "But it feels like David had a specific reason for choosing them. A reason we haven't figured out yet. We need to dig deeper. We need to find out why." Rachel leaned back in her chair, trying to process everything that was happening. The more they uncovered, the more she realized how little they knew about David Blackwood. They had cracked the surface, but there was so much more beneath it. "We need to find out everything about his life, Mark. Everything. His family, his past, his relationships. There has to be a pattern we're missing. And when we find it, we'll finally know why." As Mark left to continue the search, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they were closing in on something much bigger than just a single killer. The town of Oak Ridge had been living with the shadow of David Blackwood for too long. And now, with every new piece of evidence, that shadow was starting to lift, revealing a truth darker than anyone could have imagined. David Blackwood had been operating for years, preying on these girls, taking them, torturing them, and ending their lives. But the question remained. Why? What had made these girls the targets of his sick obsession? And what was the real story behind the monster they had uncovered? The investigation was far from over. There were still so many answers to find, and Rachel was determined to find them. Rachel stood in front of the station, staring out at the stillness of Oak Ridge, but her mind was far away. The quiet of the town was deceiving. It had been hours since she and Mark had uncovered the latest victim, Tina Roberts, and every new revelation seemed to rip open old wounds. The more they dug into David Blackwood's history, the more questions arose. There was a pattern, but it wasn't just about the victims. There was something personal behind his choice of targets, something more insidious. Rachel couldn't help but wonder. Had David been targeting these girls because of their connections to each other, or was it something deeper? She had always known that people had their reasons for their actions, but David's reasons were still wrapped in layers of madness that Rachel had yet to untangle. Why these girls? Why these friends? And how had he been able to live in Oak Ridge all these years without anyone noticing? The wind picked up, shaking the branches of the trees, and Rachel tightened her coat around her shoulders. She couldn't think about the past any longer. There was too much work ahead of her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out to see a text from Mark. "We need to meet. I've got something you need to see." Rachel didn't waste any time. She got into her car, the cold air biting at her face, and drove to the station. As she entered, Mark was already waiting for her, his face a mask of concern. He didn't even need to say a word. Rachel could see it in his eyes. "It's not good, Rachel," Mark said, his voice low. "We've been going through David's family history, trying to find any connections to the victims, and we found something." He slid a file across the desk to her. Rachel sat down and flipped through the pages. Her stomach twisted as she read the details. David Blackwood's family wasn't what it had seemed. His father, Robert Blackwood, had been a prominent figure in Oak Ridge's social circle, a respected businessman who ran the local hardware store. But what they had uncovered painted a much darker picture. Robert Blackwood had a history of violence, domestic violence to be exact. He had a criminal record that had been buried under layers of town politics, something no one in Oak Ridge had ever spoken about. He had been arrested multiple times for assault, but the charges were always dropped or settled out of court. Rachel's mind raced as she read through the documents. "This explains so much," she murmured. David's father was violent. He had a pattern of abusing women, and now we see that David followed in his footsteps. Mark nodded. "That's what we're thinking. David grew up in this environment, watching his father abuse his mother. It was always hidden, swept under the rug, but it explains why David turned out the way he did. He learned from the worst possible example." Rachel clenched her jaw. The pieces of David's twisted psyche were starting to fall into place, but it didn't make the discovery any easier to stomach. David learned that violence was how you controlled people, how you got what you wanted. He didn't know any other way. Mark leaned forward, his eyes intense. "And it's not just his father, Rachel. We've been digging deeper into David's background. His father wasn't the only violent influence in his life. We found out that David was also involved in some strange, secretive groups in high school. Some sort of underground group of kids, mostly boys, but a few girls too, who seemed to bond over cruelty. They had this twisted sense of power, a sense of entitlement. Like they were above everyone else." Rachel felt her pulse quicken. "Are you telling me that David had a group of people who helped him, who encouraged him?" "I don't know yet," Mark said, shaking his head. "But it's starting to look like it. These groups operated in secrecy, meeting in abandoned buildings, making threats to anyone who got too close. It's like they were preparing for something, like they were training to take control. We have a few names, but we haven't been able to confirm anything yet." Rachel's mind was reeling. A group. David Blackwood wasn't working alone. There were others. People who had been complicit in his sick plans, people who had stood by and let him manipulate them. The fact that David had been part of something like this only made it worse. It wasn't just about his twisted obsession with these girls. It was about a larger network of people who had been complicit in his actions, a community of predators hidden behind closed doors. "We need to find these people," Rachel said, her voice tight with determination. "We need to know who else was involved, and we need to make sure they don't get away with it." Mark nodded. "I'm already pulling together the names of anyone who might be linked to David's high school days. We're going to find out who helped him. We're going to tear down this web of secrecy." Rachel stood up, her mind already focused on the next steps. The work wasn't over yet. Far from it. David Blackwood might be behind bars, but the investigation was just beginning to uncover the depths of his depravity. The discovery of his connections to other groups, his influence over other people, only deepened the horror of what had happened. Rachel had never felt more determined to find every last person who had helped David and bring them to justice. "We need to talk to his mother," Rachel said, her voice low but resolute. "If we're going to understand how this all started, we need to hear from her. She was the one who lived with him, who saw him grow up. She must know more." Mark agreed. "I'll arrange the meeting. But be prepared. She may not know what happened, or she may be hiding something. But we need her to talk. We need her to break the silence." As Rachel prepared to visit David's mother, she couldn't shake the nagging thought in the back of her mind. What kind of influence had his mother had on him? Had she known what her son was capable of? Or had she been just as blind to his actions as the rest of Oak Ridge? Rachel thought about Sarah Winters, about the other girls. Emily, Jessica, Lily, Amanda, Michelle. And the horrifying realization dawned on her. They had all been victims of a system that allowed monsters to hide in plain sight. Oak Ridge had failed them. The town had failed them. But Rachel wasn't going to fail them. She couldn't. She would see this through to the end, no matter what it took. She had to. As she drove to David's mother's house, she couldn't help but feel the weight of everything she had uncovered so far. But she also knew one thing for certain. She wasn't done. The answers were still out there, and she wasn't going to stop until she had them. When Rachel arrived at the house, she was greeted by an elderly woman who appeared to be in her late 60s. The door creaked open, and David's mother stood there, her eyes red from crying. She had heard the news. She knew why Rachel was there. "Detective Adams," she said, her voice quivering. "Please, come in." Rachel stepped inside, her mind already racing. The answers they needed were here, in this house, and she was going to find them. "Tell me about David," Rachel said quietly as she sat down across from her. David's mother sat heavily in the chair, her hands folded in her lap. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. I never knew he was capable of something like this." Rachel's heart sank. She had expected the denial, the disbelief. But she also knew that sometimes the hardest part of solving a case was confronting the truth that was buried deep within the people closest to the killer. And in this case, that truth was more painful than anything she had anticipated. The conversation with David Blackwood's mother didn't offer any comfort, but it gave Rachel a deeper understanding of the man who had inflicted so much pain on so many. She had hoped that some glimmer of an explanation, some hint of remorse or clarity would come from his mother. But as she sat in the dimly lit living room, listening to her tearfully recount the brief moments of David's childhood, Rachel felt the weight of what she had already suspected. David's mother wasn't entirely to blame, but she had been blind to the subtle signs of violence and manipulation that had been buried deep within her son. I never saw the signs," she had whispered, her voice barely audible. "He was always so quiet, so withdrawn. But I thought he was just going through a phase. A bad one." Rachel sat quietly, processing the words. She had heard this before. The all-too-common refrain of parents who had missed the signs, the warning bells that rang in the background of their children's lives, but went unnoticed until it was too late. David Blackwood had been a ghost in his own family. His mother's lack of awareness had created the perfect cover for his darkness to grow, unnoticed by the community around them. Now, with everything she had uncovered, Rachel was more certain than ever that the monster had been nurtured in the quiet corners of this small town. And as she left David's mother's house that evening, the one question that gnawed at her, louder than ever, was why? Why had David Blackwood chosen these girls? Why had he waited so long to act? And why had he been allowed to slip through the cracks for so many years? Her phone buzzed just as she was about to get into her car. "Mark." "Rachel," he said, his voice urgent. "We've got something new. We ran the DNA from the bodies we found, and we've matched one of them to a girl who went missing in a neighboring town, about 25 miles away. Her name was Heather Wells. She went missing in 2001, and her case went cold. No one ever connected it to David, but it's the same M.O., same method of abduction, same signature, same everything.